Hey Geggy, it's your friendly neighborhood art teacher, Mrs. Kirkpatrick, and in this lesson, we are going to make some shadow art. I have already gone and found two spots in my house that I could trace to make shadow art. So I went outside this morning, it was a sunny day, and you need to have sunshine for this. If you don't have sunshine, if it's cloudy or if it's at night, if you had like a strong lamp that cast a shadow, you could use artificial light too. But I went outside today, I have a fire pit on my deck, and it was making some cool shadows. So I put my sketchbook down and I got this tracing from my fire pit. And then inside my house, I have some cacti, some succulents that are growing, and they make some really neat shadows. So I took those and I traced those. You can see there's little bits of color on my sketchbook page. That's from when I made that gemstone art painting, if you saw that video a couple weeks ago, and the color bled through. So I decided I don't want to waste that page and I'm just going to use this. It doesn't bother me. Going to be working to complete this shadow art. So I'm going to start off just by tracing the outline. I used pencil at first. I'm going to be tracing the outline, and I'm going to use oil pastel to do that. Now you could use a Sharpie, you could use crayon, but if you're going to do something like painting to add color, don't use like a Crayola marker or a Mr. Sketch marker, because those are water-based markers and they're going to bleed and run all over the place. So if you're going to add watercolor paint or any kind of paint to your paper to finish your art, I recommend using a permanent marker or a crayon, something wax-based, or an oil pastel, because that's oil-based. And those will all act like a resist and will not bleed when you put water over them. So I'm going to just get some oil pastels. I have this color right here. It's just a light blue, and I'm going to go over my outlines of this tracing of the shadows of my plants. So here we go. All right, so I have finished using my light blue oil pastel to outline the shapes that were created by the shadows of these cacti in my house. And you can see I've tried to outline every line. And now what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to paint with watercolors. So you can use watercolor paint, you could use any kind of paint you have. You could just decide to finish with crayon or oil pastel. You could use markers. You can use any kind of color that you want to do to add color to your artwork. So I'm going to use watercolor today. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be painting what's called negative space. So in art, there's positive space and negative space. The positive space is the object that's in the artwork. So the shadow that was this plant here, that was part of a cactus, that's positive space in this artwork. And this area here, that was the shadow of the second cactus that I was tracing. So that's also positive space. Now this little space here and here and here and here, all the holes in between, all the background space, all of this area up here, that's all called negative space. Negative space is just the space around whatever is in your artwork. So it's the background space, it's whatever is not the object, whatever is not the shadows is my negative space. So I'm going to leave my positive space blank for now, and I'm going to paint my negative space, and I'm going to use some watercolor. Just use what you have. So I'm going to start adding some paint here. I have my brushes, I have a paper towel, I have some water, and I'm working on a surface that I know I can clean up. So if you're working at home, make sure you either put down something underneath the space that you're working to protect what it is, or work on a space that you know you can clean up afterwards. The nice thing about using oil pastel with paint, especially with water-based paint, is that it creates what's called a resist. And that resist is like a tiny little wall on your paper, and it does not allow the paint, or it makes it harder for the paint to travel to parts of the paper that you've outlined. So that's kind of good, because I don't want the positive space of my artwork to get paint in it right now. So I can just kind of go around the outline I already created. I'm starting off with kind of a dark blue here. And because I use nice strong lines with my watercolor, that resist is working really well. So I finished my first color. I had cobalt blue that I started going around the oil pastel outline for, that acted like a resist. And I've been painting the negative space. So I went around with cobalt blue, and now I have a different color blue. It's called ultramarine. And I just wanted to change up so that it's not all exactly the same color. So I grabbed some ultramarine blue, which is just a different color blue. And before the cobalt blue fully dried, I've been going around and just adding and blending that cobalt blue. So that's a wet on wet technique with your watercolor paint. It's adding another layer of color before that first layer is fully dried. And the nice thing about that is it causes the colors to blend together as they dry. So it's going to create more of a fade than if I had waited for my first layer of blue to dry first. So I just want to create some custom blend colors in my negative space background. And I'm going to continue doing this to add more paint to my negative space and leave the positive space unpainted for now. And I'm just going to continue to layer colors wet on top of wet. And then once I let those dry, I may come back in and just sharpen everything up a little bit. All right, so I have finished the negative space in this painting, and there's about 4 layers of color on here. There's the original blue, and then I added the second color of blue, and then I mixed black into that second blue and added a third layer, and then the fourth final layer that I did was black just around the edges, kind of following the shape of that negative space. So from here, I could be done, and that could be my painting. Now, if you want to keep going, you could decide to either draw a pattern on the inside of your negative space, or your positive space, positive space. You could draw a pattern in there, or you could paint that. Once this paint is 100% dry, you could go and sharpen that up a little bit more, or add more layers of paint to create deeper colors. So I'm going to start painting my positive space and see how that turns out. So I painted in the positive space of this painting, and I wasn't super happy with how it looked with only that color. So I decided to turn this into some sunglass wearing pineapples, and I added some more oil pastel details over the top. And now I'm pretty happy with the finished product. This is my positive and negative space shadow art.